G'day everyone, it's James Davis from the Pax8 Academy down here in APAC, and I've got Nick, the founder of Released, with me. And how are you doing?
I'm super, James, and thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here.
Tell me what Released does and where you sit in the world of the technology industry.
Sure. So I've spent most of my career at the bleeding edge of technologies, and after I finished up my last company, I really wanted to find a role which had me spending all my time playing with new toys. Without getting in trouble for it. So Released was really founded around my vision of how we take software to market. And I've worked at Microsoft, I've worked for Dimension Data, which is now NTT. So I worked in the big end of town building and taking software to market. And so I founded Release really as a vehicle for me to go and not only help people do the pointy end of software development, which is how do I actually get it beyond writing the cool software and get it to market, but also look at a bunch of emerging tech and bring that into how we build tools. So my key thing around it, and for the last few years, while I've been doing this, is how do I take emerging technology, and we spent a whole bunch of time working with WebAssembly. We're now spending a whole bunch of time working with AI and generative AI, and bring that to market in a way that's not just hype and not just fun, but it's actually real and makes stuff happen.
That sounds like a whole lot of fun, and you get paid for it too.
Absolutely. Well, sometimes, although being a company, I own the risk, so it's not like I take a salary every week, but I've managed to make it work.
Well, that's exciting. I when we caught up, I got really excited how you've been talking about some of this emerging technology. Like, what do you see? What are you seeing there in that space? You mentioned like AI as an example.
Yeah,
Tell
I
me
think
about
I
it.
think there's the world of AI, and if you've been living under a rock, you haven't heard of things like ChatGPT. But a lot of feedback I get, specifically from the MSP community, is actually quite negative. So I see lots of posts flying around of people saying, "Oh, I think it was Italy have banned ChatGPT, and so therefore it's all bad and we shouldn't do it," or ChatGPT is using everybody's software, and so we shouldn't do it, or everything we upload goes to OpenAI and Microsoft, and they'll use it. So like any emerging tech, there's a whole lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt about it. But I've been using it in a number of ways to really accelerate what I do. Let me give you let me start with an example, if that will work for you. I was running my previous company wrote software for the accounting industry, and when we went to market, we went out and said, here's our software, but it requires some configuration. And so the cost to configure it, and we bundled it together, was about, and I'll pick a number in Australian dollars, about $9,000 to do a consulting engagement. And we got loads of pushback from customers. They're going, we really like your software, but boy, that's a really expensive implementation. And I thought, oh, how do I fix that? And so what we did at the time was the whole team stopped developing software and sat down and documented it within an inch of its life, and then rolled that out. And we went to customers and we said, here's the software, you can implement yourself, just follow the guide. And very quickly customers came back and said, oh, would you be able to help us implement? Yeah, absolutely, we will. But it's $15,000 for us to do it. Oh yeah, look, I've read the guide, it's really complex, can you do that please? For years I've learned, and I've learned this across the industry, I just ignore it. Documentation's a key to getting things adopted, right? We all talk about reading the manual, but having things written down is incredibly important. And well, thinking about it, back in 2004, 2005, in conjunction with Microsoft, we wrote a book called the Managed Operating Environment Resource Kit. And I remember the months of effort that went into building the book. Wildly successful for us, but months of effort. And in the last week or two, I think I've shipped 4 books on Amazon using what I now call in my business Stephen, which is generative AI, to actually help me get to that point.
It's really interesting. Like, having worked in this side of the industry where I'm educating and enabling people, it's so true around having something tangible to I guess open everyone's eyes to how complex things really are, and opening them up to being willing to adopt things. And I think that's where a lot of MSPs struggle, don't they, with that sort of adoption piece.
I think they do, and it's hard, right? So if you're running an MSP, it's difficult to get people up to speed or get things working, and a lot of the time, at least from what I've seen of MSPs, there's a whole ton of reinventing the wheel going on. So MSPs go, okay, I need to build a service for managing. Let's pick some things out of the air. Intune, Office 365. I want to roll that out across multiple businesses. I want it to have a high secure score. I want to do all those bits and pieces. And so thousands, potentially millions of MSPs around the world are going, right, let's actually work out how we're going to do it. And not just from an MSP point of view, but from a customer point of view, you don't quite know what you're going to get at the end of the day. How do I choose MSPA over MSPB? So I think finding a way to document and publish and maintain those sorts of things, I think, is really important. And in a way, doing it centrally, if we could, would save MSPs a bunch of time so they can go service customers rather than building solutions that put together products.
And I guess this is why there's so many ISVs springing up for solutions for MSPs with all these problems, because we are searching for, I guess, a shortcut to success in a lot of ways, but it's also that pragmatic management of gross margins, because all of this is very labor intensive, the
Yep.
things that we're doing.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of it, and interestingly enough, over the last week, as well as doing my stuff on AI, I'm involved in a football club, and so I spent time inside Office 365 turning on features to improve their secure score. And that's if I was doing that for 100 customers, that's a ridiculously labor intensive piece of work, and then going, if I change this, what are the knock-on ramifications? What are the effects of it happening? And I was one of the first organizations to deploy Office 365 in Asia Pacific. I know the space, but spent a bunch of time going, if I do that, what's going to be the impact of these users? Am I going to break the business? All those sorts of things. And so a day went by before I actually got to a point where something worked. And given, I think, at least in the Office 365 world, how we're being pushed to do more with less. There's a big margin squeeze. Everybody realizes it's not as intensive as something like Small Business Server was, or rolling out stuff like that. You've got to get quicker, faster, and better. Yet there's all these things to go and configure. So it would be lovely, if we could sit down and say to an AI, or say to someone, actually, can you just say, here are the top 20 things this week that you need to go configure, and even better, here's a PowerShell script which goes and does it. And I think AI offers us that. It doesn't remove the human, it doesn't remove the choice, but it certainly speeds the delivery of that. And one of the things I've been playing with quite a lot is speeding up delivery and getting it closer to the bleeding edge. So we're writing a product at the moment called World of Workflows, which is a business automation platform. Integrates with a bunch of things, and I'm sure we'll talk about it as we go on. But one of the things that challenges me is every month the devs come up with a bunch of new features. We've got a big roadmap, and all that happens. And we can't just ship new features and not tell people about it. So how do I keep up with that level of documentation without having a team of technical authors? And that's where generative AI and things like ChatGPT and its peers really help me get that stuff out the door.
It's an interesting point that you made there around like keeping up with the changes, because obviously that's one of the biggest challenges that I'm seeing for MSPs, especially with the cyber security requirements are ramping up, and uh, obviously threat actors are getting cleverer and cleverer. They'll be starting to use automation and AI as well.
I'm sure they already are, and you know what threat actors are like, right? They're ahead of us, but
But they've got big budgets, don't
yeah,
they? Like that's the thing. So like that point around like keeping up with the roadmap of changes, it's interesting from your perspective as a software person. I guess with MSPs, we're always that reactive. We've been built on the back of the reactive support side, and management only came in to reduce the issues. It's not actually the starting point for a lot of our businesses. So maybe. I'm curious, like when you're looking at software development and you mentioned the road mapping process, what does that actually look like? Because I can see the similarities between like yeah, managing them 365 tenancies and keeping up with the changes and stuff. How do you do that?
It's quite an interesting balance to do those types of things. So, giving you an example, what we try to do very carefully is we have this inflection point called the minimum viable product. But the way I describe it is we all sit in a ivory tower and decide to write some software. And you need to get it in the hands of customers as quickly as you can because it's customers who actually tell you how you should write your software and what features you should have and what they want. And every plan you have before that inflection point of putting it in the customer's hands, you might as well throw away the minute you give it to customers because the things they care about are not the things you think about and not the things you think are important. And I've done lots of work historically as well with first-time founders, so people who come out of industry or come out of a certain area of business and want to go write some software. And one of the things I do is help them realize that and we spend a ton of time coaching them that all of the things they think are important are absolutely not important the minute you put the software in the customer's hands. In fact, you should do as little as possible to build your product because you need to spend most of your money once you give it to people. So we use customer requests as our roadmap now. So we'll go, here's a piece of software we want to build. For example, our workflows product, we want it to use, yeah, Azure Active Directory for authentication. We want it to connect directly to Power BI for reporting. We want to, here's all the
Yep.
myriad of lists of things we want. And we had to sit down and say, what's the minimum we can do to give it to customers and then see what they want? And funnily enough, when we took it to customers, the very first thing they said was, we want integration into an electronic forms product like JotForm. That's more important than authentication. That's more important than reporting. That's more important than a bunch of things we had at the top of our list. So it's super important to listen to customers, and that's not just a software analogy. I think that's an analogy for every type of business where you have customers involved, specifically MSPs. Is you'll sit in a room and say, right, we want it to be totally secure. We'd like, for example, the signatures to be the same on everybody's Outlook. We'd like, this, that, and the other, and you give it to customers, and they go, we want the logo to be purple. That's most important to us. So it's that listening's more important than building something up front. Road mapping's a listening exercise and a translating it into action.
And I think that's the challenge for MSPs, isn't it? Like we don't. What I found from my experience, we don't listen to those things because we're so technically focused of and behind the scenes of the infrastructure. And we'll get to this point, but this is where the challenges are going to come from the digital transformation and workflows and automation and all that kind of stuff as we have to evolve our business models because we're actually listening to the clients. We always think we know best. This is how you run a modern IT environment, and often the clients don't know. So that sort of conversation doesn't typically happen. Um, and I found that your point around the minimum viable product and the clients providing feedback, I think that's our challenge with, say, the Office 365 example. Outside of the productivity side, they don't really have any feedback around how it should be set up, and probably more dangerously, they don't know what we're doing. So, as you said earlier, this is getting commoditized, and they don't know what we're doing, and there's no communication. So, it's probably a bit easy when you're a software dev and you're backwards and forwards because they can touch and feel the product. How would you go about communicating that sort of roadmap and what's changing in something that people can't see and touch and feel?
Yeah, so that's a really important point, and lots of MSPs, or at least what lots of I've seen, actually keep all that configuration of Office 365, and that whole scenario has exploded since it was first released. We've got the security center, we've got compliance, we've got purview, we've got all of these extra knobs and dials and buttons we can tweak with. Lots of MSPs keep that away from the customer and just go and configure it. And while there's a lot of customers out there that may not understand the nuts and bolts of what you're doing, they certainly understand their fiduciary obligations, and they understand how to run their business, and they're responsible for it. And I think in a way, not involving them is a kind of misnomer. So the question, how do you communicate that to them, is crazy important. And in my mind, I think that has to be done with lots of. There's a couple of ways, and it depends. A great friend of mine once talked about how people consume information, especially stuff which is unfamiliar to them. And people consume it in different ways. And I see lots of people go, oh, we'll do some videos, or we'll do an audio podcast, or we'll write some documentation. The answer is you have to do all of it, because people consume stuff, and you'd obviously know this, James, working at Pax8 Academy. People consume things in different ways. And that kind of comes back to the stuff we've been doing with generative AI, in that there are now tools out there like ChatGPT, which will write you a script, Synthesia, which will build you a video and audio, plus some audio production and video production technologies. And you can very quickly go from, a concept around secure score and data leakage prevention into a 5-minute video for your clients, into a 5-minute podcast for your clients, into a document that you ship to your clients, all in a couple of hours. And so the days when you had to spend days and days and days building this, I think, are gone. And while AI generated training videos aren't for public marketing consumption, for stuff you're doing internally with your clients, they're absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, that's a really interesting concept. I think a lot of people, or like you said earlier, a lot of people are very against, they're bit fearful of this sort of AI technology, but that enablement piece is so important. And like you said earlier, a lot of people are running so thin and don't have the resources. A lot of the, even if you're not fully on board with it, a lot of this is better than not doing anything at all. When we've just spoken about the lack of communication. Like I pick out an example, most MSPs have rolled out some form of client portal to their clients, but they have very low adoption rates because there's no real reason to jump into their client portal. We've rolled it out for our selfish needs of, well, go lodge a ticket in there, but as an end user, why would I log into something once in the blue moon if there's no other reason to go in other than lodging a ticket? So this sort of thing is something that you can use to populate that portal and make it very vibrant and have a lot of value to the clients and end users. So I think it's just, you're helping me shift my mindset as well of what's possible. And I'm hoping that people who are listening are getting some sparks of ideas of things they can do.
Yeah, no, I think you want to do that with customers, right? It's not just for so long, when we're back in the world of break fix through to the world of MSP, we've seen it as delivering a base level of technology service. So we keep the lights on, we make it secure, we make sure it works, we fix it when it's broken. But if you and it's funny, stuff I'm doing at the moment, I'm working alongside an MSP, and I see loads of behaviours I'd love to go and shake up and fix. But one of the customers they work with has very low technology skills, and so they'll turn around quite often. I think my favourite one from this week is somebody sent out a spreadsheet and got the email back to the help desk. Can you now sort that for me by this? Right. So most of us listening to this, I'm sure, would go, really? Yep. And then make comments about dumb users and what do they know and all sorts of things like that. But there's a massive opportunity for an MSP to go into your customers and not just educate your staff, but educate their staff to make them more efficient. And I think it's not just making your MSP as efficient as it can be. And certainly I've seen in MSP land crazy inefficiencies. Some background on me, I ran a business back between 2002 and 2007, which automated desktop deployment on a large scale. So we'd go and automate. We worked with Singapore government and a whole bunch of others, and we had it down to a single person in a lab for a month could deploy thousands of desktops without even thinking about it and continue that process. And yet I look at MSPs now who make sure laptops are shipped to them and spend a day configuring it with the RMM and the antivirus and all the third-party tools, and then ship it out to the clients and they get it and the screen doesn't quite work and they can't sort spreadsheets and stuff like that. There's automation here which solves that. Once you've solved that, the next thing is to educate the people within your customers' environments and make them better and more efficient. And I think that's also hard for MSPs because they go, well, we're tech people, we're involved in the nuts and bolts of how it works. We're not educators. I think education. If I think of the pillars of what you need to do with a modern client, education, automation, speeding up your client's environment is what moves you up the value chain from being just another MSP that does Office 365 in June and maybe some other bits to somebody who really works in the core of that business and makes it better and makes it grow.
And you're touching on something that's very close to my heart. I might be a bit biased around the education part of making people's businesses better. And I think what sparks my creativity in talking to you is hearing all these different types of technology. So we've been talking about how to roll that out internally in our own business, and that's often where we can start. But you think of an average MSP about $3 million, they probably have 100 clients on the books. There's 100 opportunities to look at doing the same sort of thing, and education, automation, this workflow stuff that you said, yeah, goes up the value chain. That's a lot more money than it is fixing broken desktops or managing an Office 365 tenancy. You can charge three, four, $500 an hour kind of billables compared to the $150 average MSP charge out rate.
Yeah, so I tend to think of it as IT spend per user per month. If you look at organizations which are highly mature, they're highly electronified. And I'll use a crazy example. When I worked at Microsoft, which was a while ago now, I'll give you that. But the goal was every employee needed to be responsible for $1 million a year in revenue. Right? And you wouldn't get hired unless they could find a way to make that maths happen. If you thought about that in your business, and you think, wow, I've got 10 employees, that's a $10 million revenue line. How do I make that happen? And that's where we look at scale and automation and all sorts of things. And I think I had the pleasure of talking to somebody incredibly senior at Unilever many moons ago, and he said, you know what the business between a small manufacturing company and Unilever is? And I said, no, I've got no idea what's the difference. He said, well, Unilever, we purely work off data, and the small manufacturing company works off gut. I think this is the right thing to do. I'm not measuring it. It feels right. I've been doing this for years. I obviously know my industry. He said, that's the only difference. If a small manufacturing company or a small MSP actually looked at customer sat and how efficient were my clients and number of tickets and how quickly I'm resolving it and all that data and did things to move those needles, then you very quickly become a far bigger business rather than going, I think this has always been the right thing to do, or I think this is the right thing to do, or those things. So it's using tech everywhere to make you and your customers more efficient and better. And to corollary on that, I think it's getting harder and harder for MSPs to find new clients, and I think that's because if you look at the bottom end of the MSP world, which used to be servers in racks and things like Small Business Server and Active Directory and virtual desktops and all of the stuff we used to build, now it's in the cloud. It never goes wrong. And I remember back then the biggest way I used to get into another client was talking about uptime. Right? We didn't have the downtime those guys did, so it was better. Now everybody has amazing uptime. Right? Office 365 just worked. So how do you compete now against another MSP? And I think that's in making your stuff better, making your business more efficient, driving up that value chain for your customers is where it's kind of cool and exciting.
Well, talk to me a bit more about the World of War. I was going to say World of Warcraft, the World of War workflows.
Workflows.
Tell
Yes.
me about that and what you see the opportunities for MSPs with the sort of workflow side of things.
Absolutely. So World of Workflows started off when we were working with an insurance company, and we were talking to them about a set of processes they did to renew an insurance policy. And boy, I never realized how complicated it was to renew an insurance policy. But the way they were working was they decided that it's too expensive to do this in Australia, so they built a team in the Philippines, and they needed to track all this stuff, and they were using that wonderful tool Excel to track everything that was going on. But it was getting a little out of hand. Not it was fine when it was small, but they moved up to thousands of insurance policies. And it was really hard to track where things were, how things were going, whether they were going well, whether they were going badly, and they started to make mistakes and get out of compliance. And so I went, well, if I was going to solve this, I kind of want three things. I want to get rid of Excel and store stuff in a proper grown-up database. I want something which actually manages that whole process flow because computers can make decisions on that stuff. And given that it's a business, it needs to be able to change at a whim because regulations change and businesses change. And also, while we talk about automating business processes, there's still humans involved. There are still human decisions that need to be made. And so how do I do that without having to train everybody on a big process? How do I onboard people? And kind of the vision for workflows was born. And workflows is kind of got three pillars. We've got a big fat database underneath, which can be extended by the customer. So you can sit down and go, here's my business process. I need to store this data. You can extend out your columns and tables in a way that's crazy efficient. We've got a workflow engine, which if you've used Visio is almost identical. You sit there and drag and drop your actions and glue them together with connections. Meaning when you change your business process, you go into this and publish a new version of your workflow, which makes it really flexible. And then sitting next to it is a task system, but one that not only allows you to put instructions of what to do in the task, not only can you put data into that as well, but actually allows you to modify your data on the way through and have different outcomes, and those make the whole thing come together. So it's a platform for automating businesses. It's also got a bunch of seamless integration points. So I can, one of them is I can integrate it straight into Power BI and report from it because that's important, but you can build your own because obviously the data's changing as you go. The other one is the ability to reach into any REST API whatsoever. And REST APIs are how most bits of software talk to other bits of software. So Xero has one, Office 365 has one, Twilio has one, Autotask has one. They've all got these APIs, but we also have a plugin system. So as we see things which we really, really want to automate, for example, Office 365, we ship a plugin. So you can go, oh, I'd like Office 365, and now I can send an email, create a task, create a SharePoint file, etc., etc. And that bundled together is workflows, and it's for automating your business, but also helping your clients automate theirs.
This is what gets me excited. I'm one of those weird people that like business flows and how to make more money out of it. I see this as an interesting thing that MSPs are very focused on automation, even if they don't really realize it, because we've got like the ERP system, PSAs, ConnectWise, Autotask type of thing, and then we've got all these plugins that integrate in it. And even if we're not going down to the sort of coding or process driven level, we're doing that integration process. But I find a lot of MSPs don't look out to their clients and look what they're doing with the software. And I'm not sure why. Why do you think that is?
I think traditionally, and if I look back, and I'm 50 now, so I've been in the industry a little while. I think if I look back, there were certain things you could handle and support, and there were certain things you couldn't. And supporting line of business applications has always been in the too hard basket for lots of people. But one of the things is the same thing that happened to Office 365, i.e. commoditizing it, making it work in the cloud, and really if you don't know what you're doing, you can still make it work. The same things happen to line of business applications, and I think MSPs, there's a lot of things. It's actually really interestingly parallel with the accounting industry, which I spent some time in as well. Is a lot of MSPs try something once, and if it fails, they'll never ever ever go back to it. So, oh yeah, we tried doing line of business app support in 1998, and it was horrible, and I'm never going back there. Well, that world's changed too. So I think there's a massive opportunity to go into your customers to sit down. We have a thing where we're just about to release called the automation assessment, which is a 2-hour engagement you can use with existing customers or new customers, where you actually, for free, and trust me, this is a great pre-sales activity, go in and do a structured engagement with your customers where you look at opportunities for automation. And those could be things that use World of Workflows. They could be things you could do in Office 365, like you could use bookings, or you could use Power Automate, or there's a whole bunch of things that your customers have already bought that they could improve their businesses with. Or you could use World of Workflows and do some more advanced stuff. So there's all of those opportunities, and I think as MSPs we're missing them. And that's where I see competitiveness coming in the MSP industry, in that instead of walking in and saying, I can stop your servers going down, I can reduce your downtime, we go, I can save you half a team member a year, or I can automate this painful process, or I can remove the number of failures. And that's really exciting, and that's where I think we have the opportunity to compete and grow our customer bases.
What do you think is the key skill in being able to be able to get started in this? Let's forget mastery. If we're just getting started, what do you reckon the key skills are?
So the first key skills are really open mind, and I think people struggle with that. If we look at what's happening in industry at the moment, and let's pick generative AI as one of those cool ones, this area of the industry is moving at a rocket fast pace. Try and use some examples around that. In the average human lifetime, you hear about 1 billion words, right? And if we assume the brain works in a similar way to a generative AI, and there's some truth in that, by hearing 1 billion words put together, we're able to form sentences and communicate and do all those sort of things. GPT-4, which is OpenAI's latest version of their generative AI, has been trained in 7 billion words. Not that it knows more words than you; it's seen 7 billion words together, and that's why it's so amazing on how it puts things together. So I would be going in and learning how to prompt it to get the answers you need. And I'll use an example from yesterday. I had lunch with a marketing guy who's going to go out and do some telemarketing for us. And he said, I really, really like the ability to give away something to customers. So even if they don't sign up, they've got something they can go and grab and read, and so like a booklet or a book, etc. And I said, I can write a book. And he goes, okay, so we'll start in a month or so when you've written the book. I said, no, we'll start tomorrow. He goes, what do you mean we'll start tomorrow? And I sat down in 2 hours with good old ChatGPT and Kindle Direct Publishing and all sorts of things. And we wrote, it was an executive focused book. It wasn't technical, but it was executive focused on how to automate businesses with World of Workflows. And in 2 hours, I shipped, 60,000 word, 82-page book all the way through to Amazon with all the graphics built together into the point where we can now order 100 paperbacks for our campaign. So if I can do that, and I'm not particularly smart, but I've played with this stuff, I enjoy it. If I can do that, think about that for your business, right? Think about the things we're talking to customers about, like ISO 27001 or Essential 8 or all of those big things that resonate with customers. Imagine if you're able to turn around and leave behind a physical item which explains how it was. They can read it at their own time. Imagine when you're prospecting doing that, and your competitors walking in and saying, I can do Office 365 for you. Think about who's going to win that engagement. So that's exciting.
It is exciting, and not only can you win it, you can charge a lot more money for it.
Yep.
I know when I talk to partners about these kinds of concepts, and one of the ones I always use is, obviously I coach MSPs, and you mentioned this very, very early on in the piece around how many MSPs run with a lot of inefficiencies. I've worked with people that have been like $5 to $10 million companies that have like 6 admin staff behind the scenes, and I can walk in and help them make their processes run smoother, and I can remove like 4 of them. So that, if you start putting dollars to all of this, 4 admin staff are going to cost you on average probably 60K a year. I'm probably being a bit generous on this, but $250,000 a year, and you could charge half that for the first year to solve that problem, because they're saving $250,000 a year moving forward, and it's a very different value proposition. And what you just said there around like the skill of being open-minded and learning. The other thing is thinking about your business model very differently, and how to frame the conversations. Like you said, we're not walking in to say we can fix these things and we can respond faster. It's What are your challenges? How does that impact you? Being able to quantify the cost of that, and then being able to sell in a value position rather than a per hour or per seat pricing. Um,
And
and
value-based pricing is really important, James. And I haven't seen when I joined Microsoft in 2000, which seems like forever ago. The first week I was there, I ended up going on a course by Franklin Covey called "Helping Clients Succeed," and this course was all about value-based selling or consultative selling, as it's called, going and listening to your customers. And if you imagine, I'm working for Microsoft, there was a million products I've got behind me to go and solve every business problem known to man. But that was a process of really sitting with the customer, understanding their pains, and then understanding the financial side of both of those. Actually, what we call peeling the onion to understand with the customer that if I went and fixed this problem or I went and created this benefit, it would have this financial impact to the business. And if you can get to that point, then how much it is, that price equation becomes really irrelevant. And I think we are, the favorite stat I read the other day, somebody was saying in a presentation, what is the most popular version of Office 365 used by SMBs? And I went, oh, SMBs, it's got to be business premium. Well, how wrong was I? Right? It's right down the bottom of the stack. And when I was selling to SMBs, I was selling E3 because of all the features we needed to solve business problems. That's a analogy for how you should be thinking about your customers. You should be giving them mature and grown up software solutions to actually reduce the cost or improve the gain of their businesses, which then make the cost of, you know, $17.95 a month versus $56 a month seem so irrelevant to both of you that why are you having the question? And that's the place we want to get customers to, and that's by understanding the value proposition.
it's it's difficult, isn't it? But you've got to. I think it goes back to what you've said a few times in this conversation is stop and listen. And if I was to boil down, I think most MSP owners do have this sort of curiosity. They do want to spend the time with their clients and have this, but most people aren't in a position to be able to breathe and do this kind of stuff because of their operational maturity in their own business. They're running around bushfire after bushfire trying to solve problems instead of being able to slow down and look at these opportunities. So if I was to give anyone advice before you start diving into this outside of like just getting in the brain space to be open-minded is focus on getting a steady base on and foundation in your MSP and then start doing these kinds of things and being having the room to be creative again.
Yeah,
Um,
and I think do it to you is it's impossible to go and have a conversation with your customer if the ship's sinking behind you. I think going and looking at opportunities for automation in your business and implementing it and reducing cost and improving benefit is going to shift not just your thinking, not just your team's thinking, but it means you don't need a case study of doing it for someone else if you've done it for your own business. And that's what, yeah, if you think of your customers, they're going to go in the main, the most technologically mature organization I know is my MSP. Might be
yep,
my accountant, probably my MSP. You've got to lead the way so that they've got someone they can follow. And if they walk into your office and, like you said, there's six admin staff copying things from one system into another on two screens everywhere, you're not exactly leading the way on what's really possible with this tech.
and that's a really good point. I think we could talk about this all day. Like I'm excited. I could quiz you. If we wrap up, what would you like to leave as the biggest takeaway, the biggest thought bubble for people listening through this?
Well, I think if I was sitting running an MSP today, I would put my prejudices and all the negative information I'd heard aside and go and play with some of the generative AI tools. And I'd just go and look at ChatGPT. It's really simple to get to. It's chat.openai.com and it's free to start. And start asking it some questions. I asked it a question the other day going, if we were to break managed service providers into four maturity pillars, what would that look like? And it came back with, initial, intermediate, advanced, and another one, and talked about what Microsoft software you should be selling in the middle. So go ask it questions about your business, but don't do what your customers do and send a help desk ticket going, it's broken. Learn how to build prompts where you're leading a generative AI to give you the right answers. So they're quite wordy and there's lots there, but if you ask it the right questions, have a look at how that can help your business and then think about how that can apply to your clients. But that's where I'd start.
Well, that's some awesome advice, and I really appreciate your time. It's been great to have you, and no doubt I will get you back because I just get excited about this stuff. So I could talk with you all day. So thanks so much, Nick. It's been great having you.
Pleasure, James. Thanks for having me.